Hold on. Shavua Tov, everyone. Tonight is Motzaei Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Baruch and Tammuz. Read the parsha of Shlach in Chutz La'aretz and Korach here in Eretz Yisrael. Say some stories before we start our class, as we do on on uh, on Eretz Yisrael, which is connected to, and the laws of Chala, which are connected to this week's parsha Shlach. So there's a few amazing stories we'll tell tonight before we learn our class. So again, thank you, Judith, for inspiration for the stories of tzaddikim. So Mordechai of Remeir was this person called Remeir, who was a Chassid disciple, hey Rebecca Shvutov, of Mordechai of Lechovich. And he was traveling once, and on his travels, he stopped off in an inn, so he could daven, and he liked to daven ba'arichos at length, and to have the peace of mind of the privacy of his hotel room, etc., of his to not have to travel on the road. So he stops off in this inn on the way, and as he's getting ready to daven and preparing himself for davening, a group of poor people that were traveling through the area, and so the custom was they would stop in the inn, and for maybe a little bit of funds, they would be given, or even for free, be given by the host or the hostess of the inn a meal so they could eat. And here was a group of men, women, children, all types of people. And this Reb Meir notices that one of the people, there was something very refined about this person. He looked very edel, like they say, very refined, very pure, very tahor. And so he's watching him as he's getting ready to daven. He's not part of this meal, obviously. And he sees that the woman of the inn puts down a spread of a meal and puts down bread. And while everyone jumps and attacks the food, again, these are poor people, Nebuchadnezzar haven't eaten. He sees this older person is first taking his time. He goes to the washing basin. He goes to check the vessel, the shissel, the kvart, to wash his hands for Netilas Yadayim, to make sure it was according to halacha. There was no holes in it, as we learn in the halachos of washing hands, that the cup is kosher for washing the hands. And then he's about to wash his hands. He picks up a piece of bread that he's going to make the hamotzi on, and Remeir sees, he puts the piece of bread back down. And then he takes another piece of bread from like an older loaf or something. He washes his hands and he eats, and then after they eat and they leave, they continue on their travels. So they don't stay in the hotel, but they get a meal. And this Remeir is really wondering about this person, and his obviously he's some sort of special Jew. And what was this idea with the bread? So as he was davening, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Finally, after the davening, he goes over to the hostess of the inn and he asks her, by any chance, did you make sure to give challah, which we learned about in this week's parsha, of the bread that you presented to the poor people in the meal before? And she slaps her hand against the floor. She says, "Oi, Mamsh, I forgot. I can't believe it. You remind me, and I forgot to give challah." So now this Remeir realized that this person was actually a very holy spiritual person, not just a refined person, but also a person that had the vision to know that the bread was not after challah. So he jumps on his horse and buggy, and he runs after this group to find this special person. He reaches the group of the poor people, and he says, "Where's that elderly fellow that was traveling with you?" And they said, "Oh, why would you ask about him? He's so strange. He joined us a few weeks ago. He travels with us. He just his behavior is strange. He just walks off to the forest and stands there for hours. And we even caught him breaking the ice, and he jumps in to take an ice bath, an ice plunge, and not realizing, of course, that's a mikvah." And he's a strange person. Why would you ask? Where is he? He asked, "Where is he?" He said, "I think he's in the forest now." So he goes to the forest, and without even asking anything, he just walks over to this obviously holy person, and he says, "Rebbe, bless me." Doesn't ask him who he is, just, "Rebbe, bless me." So the elderly person says, "Give me a copper coin," which is customary to give a tzaddik a pidyon before you get a blessing. So he gives him a copper coin and he blesses him. Later, he goes back to his Rebbe, Ramar Lechovich, and he tells him the story. And he says, "Oh, Rameir, you're so worthy. That person was none other than the holy, holy hidden tzaddik and a student of the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Leib Saros. Reb Leib Saros, we talked about before, the very holy hidden tzaddik that was known in the times of the Baal Shem Tov and a little afterwards, that would travel with people around, with Jewish people, helping them in Parnassa. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said once that it's very possible that Reb Leib Saros was actually none other than the Shpalei Zayda. It's about the Shpalei Zayda, it says, we should mention the Baal Shem Tov in a story tonight, that the Baal Shem Tov would once the Shpalei Zayda told the Alter Rebbe, it's actually in Hayom Yom, that his mother once took him into the city center, and in the city center was standing this looked like a poor shepherd with shepherd's clothing, and he was telling a story to the people, and he said the Shpalei Zayda said, my mother wanted me to see this storyteller, and afterwards she went over to the storyteller and she said, bless my son. And he put his hand on the heart of the Shpalei Zayda when he was a little boy. And the Shpalei Zayda said, ever since then, my heart was on fire. And this was, the person obviously was none other than the Baal Shem Tov. So the Baal Shem Tov, so he became, Reb Leib Saros became a hidden tzaddik. They say also that the Alter Rebbe the Alter Rebbe wrote a book called Sefer Shel Tzaddikim, the Book of the Righteous, which was never published. And this book of the Tzaddikim was burnt down with other fires that were burnt in by the Sfarim of the Alter Rebbe. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe said that when the Sefer Tzaddikim was burnt, the soul of the Shpalei Zayda went up to Shemayim. Now back to our story. This Reb Meir is again traveling, and he gets lost in the forest. He sees a house, a large house. He knocks on the door, and there's a woman preparing food, and he asks if he could stay there for the night. And she says, sure. And all of a sudden, towards the evening, late at night, her husband comes with a group of men, and he realizes that he actually walked in on a house of bandits, not just bandits, but of people that were going to they were going to murder him, and they were even hiding it. He couldn't do anything. They locked all the doors and the windows, and they said, Shavuot Tov, Jonathan and Julie, they said they're going to kill him after the meal. So he starts davening. He has no way out. All of a sudden, there's a pounding on the window. Open up, open up. And the bandits become all frightened. And there was a group of Russian travelers who broke down the door because it was very cold. And they were a large group of people. And when they saw that they were about to kill this Reb Meir, who was now all tied up, they saved him, and they arrested, citizens arrest of all of these bandits. And later they told Reb Meir, and they said, you should know, it's so strange. We never get lost. We know these roads very well. We got lost on the road. We don't understand how. Later Reb Meir goes back to his Rebbe, Reb Mordechai. And Mordechai said, it was the copper coin that you gave Reb Leib Saros, which is why you were saved from this horrible death that you were going to unfortunately possibly experience. I just want to say one more story about get ready before we learn our halacha class. So Reb Leib Saros is like the Baal Shem Tov, the hidden tzaddik in the time of Baal Shem Tov. But the Rebbe says it's possible was the Shpalei Zayda. Another story is of a tzaddik, the author of the Basayin, famous tzaddik Avram Dov of Arvich. So he was a Rebbe for many years in Europe, and when he was a Rebbe in his city in Europe, he was in Arvich. He was once approached by a meshulach, a person that was sent from this holy city of Tzfas, which was customary to collect money from the Jewish communities in the diaspora. And this meshulach from Tzfas, who was a holy rabbi on his own, was telling the Rebbe of Avram Dov of the Basayin of how great and beautiful Eretz Yisrael is. Right? This is the parsha of Shlach, of the spies on Eretz Yisrael, and how beautiful Eretz Yisrael is. And he says the fruits are amazing, and the view is amazing, and the air is amazing, and the water just tastes amazing. He's just going on about the greatness and the most beautiful and special of Eretz Yisrael. And he said that you should know that even the stones in Eretz Yisrael are like pearls. And he so inspired this Rabbi Avram, the Basayin, to go and travel to Eretz Yisrael. So he told his community, that's it, I'm leaving, I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. And he goes to the city of Tzfas. And he comes to Tzfas, and eventually he meets up again with this Meshulach. So the Meshulach says to him, "Well, no, Rabbi, what do you think about the Eretz Yisrael?" So he goes, "You didn't exaggerate. The fruit is amazing, the air is amazing, the water is amazing, the view, everything. The only thing I could say you exaggerated a bit about was the stones are not exactly like pearls." So the Meshulach said to him, "Oh, Rabbi, only one who's worthy can see that." So he felt very bad. So Rabbi Avram Dov, it says he locked himself up. The Basayan locked himself up. We call him the Basayan because he offered the famous sefer, the Basayan. His name is Rabbi Avram Dov. He had locked himself up in a room for a year, didn't communicate with anyone until he was able to elevate himself. And when he came out, he said, the person's right. The stones are like pearls. So this is a story about Eretz Yisrael and how we're supposed to have chibas Eretz Yisrael. And this Rav Ram Dov himself was a student of the Chernobyl Rebbe's and a student of Reb Levi Yitzchak Batichev. Later, his own student, Reb Shmuel Heller, became the chief rabbi of Tzfas for 50 years. So these are all special people, and these are all actually. I read that the Bas Ayin actually was instrumental with raising funds and organizing from Sir Moshe Montefiore to set up settlements in Eretz Yisrael. So actually, yeshivars, not just to live in Eretz Yisrael, but help settling the land. All right, everyone, we're going to thank you for joining in our story time, and now let's bring up the halachos that we're learning in the laws of tefillah. So let's one second. Let's bring up the page here. Okay. So we started last week, chapter 21, which deals with how do you complete or how do you compensate when you miss a davening. So we learned law number Daled 4 that dealt with the question of Musaf. Musaf is a challenge because Musaf is especially an addition. The word Musaf is, of course, an additional prayer that's added for special days like Rosh Chodesh, Chol Hamoed, etc. So Musaf is usually done after the Shacharis sacrifice. It means the morning prayer Shacharis is for corresponding to the Tamid in the morning sacrifice that we do every morning, the Tamid Shaboker and Shachar. The Musaf is for the special, if there's a special addition that's done after the Tamid. So, but although we said the rule is you could only make up for a lost prayer in the next prayer. It means if you miss Shacharis, you can't make up for Shacharis in Ma'ariv, because you have only Mincha. By Mincha, if you still forget by Mincha that you didn't have Shacharis, or if you miss Mincha and Shacharis, so for whatever reason, whether it's an Einus, it's not important why. If you miss it, unless it's a Mazid, so then it's intentionally. So then you could only make up one prayer, which would be the Mincha and Ma'ariv. But the question is, if you missed Shacharis, and now you're holding so the Musaf is the next prayer. But it's not so simple, because although Musaf should be done earlier in the day, but it can be done until the end of the time of Mincha. So therefore, it's so we're just going to go over quickly this law because we didn't do it properly last week. A day that has Musaf. Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, right? Monday is Rosh Chodesh. If you forget to daven the morning prayer, you could even so you can make up until the evening. Kamay mincha, inkain. Lo yover shtei zmanik tefillas, you didn't pass two prayers. Ulachet tefillas musaf, any yochel ashim tefillas shachas. But once you already prayed the musaf, means if you didn't pray the musaf yet, so you can make up for the shacharis until the evening. But if you prayed the musaf, then it's too late. The kivin shemaskva korban musaf, because you mentioned the musaf prayer, any roy shetal tefillas shacharis, it's not appropriate to mention the morning prayer. Ariel, your excitement for the Knicks is beautiful. I'm just gonna have to turn off your screen. It's disrupting me. So he says that Kivan, because we mentioned Musaf, and Musaf has to be after the Tamid. So once you ready daven Musaf, it's not appropriate to do the Shachris afterwards. But if it didn't finish the time of Shachris, means let's say that you have an early minyan, you do Shachris Musaf, and you do Musaf, but it's still the time of Shachris, then of course you could daven the Shachris even though you did Mincha, you did Musaf. So if you didn't do Musaf, you could do Musaf until the end of Mincha, till the evening, till the end of Mincha time. If you did Musaf and it's already past the Shacharis time, you can't do Shacharis again because the Tamid sacrifice, which corresponds to the morning prayer, can't be done after the Musaf. I mean, the Musaf comes afterwards. That's when we would do the sacrifice in the temple. First, you would do the Tamid Shel Shachar, and then you do the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, let's say. But if it's still the time of the Tamid Shel Shachar, let's say you daven Netz, or whatever reason why you would have daven Musaf still in the time of Shachris davening, you forgot or you didn't know, you walked into shul and you just got disrupted and you thought that everyone's davening Musaf, you joined them, and you didn't daven Shachris, it's a shogeg. So nevertheless, you could still daven the Shachris in this case because it's still the time where you could sacrifice the Shachar Shel Tamid, which is when you could daven Shachris. Okay, we did the footnotes on this. I just wanted to do over this law. Now let's go to law number 5. Ein tashlumim l'tfilah shehifsid ela bizman tfilah smuchala. This is an important point. The point is, you can't just, if you miss Shachris, and it's mincha time, so you can't daven Shachris now, you can daven mincha. But you're not going to do mincha now, you're going to do mincha later, or whatever have you. You can't just do the second tefillah anytime you want. It has to be together actually when you do the next tefillah. It means if you forget Shachris, so by mincha you daven, you wait a few minutes. They say you have to wait to dal lamas to walking for paces, but you have to daven it in the same time. It means you daven Shachris, mincha, and then you daven Shachris. So you daven them together. Only when you're actually davening the next prayer. Not at a time that's not a time of davening. He gives an example. Let's say you missed achet she spal tefillah she chayves shah. Any yochel spal oy tashlumay tefillah shefset. Let's say you daven mincha, and you remember, I didn't daven shachris, but you daven mincha a while ago. You can't just start davening shachris now because you remembered you didn't daven shachris. You were able to do it when you davened the mincha. So the fishalai tiknu tashlum l'tefillah shefset ela bizmanchu oisik b'tefillah, because the only time you could make up for a prayer is when you're actually davening, but not just out of the blue. Which is the obligation you have at that time. Shas given to Isaac b'tefillah because you're davening. Shechayv shah, which is you have to do it at that time. Shas given to Isaac b'tefillah who mashlim gamkin mashachaser, because you're davening you can make up what you lack, but you can't just in the time of mincha. In theory, when you could daven mincha, you already did the tefillah. Just do middle of nowhere. Just say, I forgot chakras. I'm going to do chakras. And same thing apply obviously with Ma'ariv. Let's see what the footnote says. According to the Mishnah Berurah, however, this is what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says. According to the Mishnah Berurah, however, so long as the time of the prayer is not passed, you may make up for the prayer you missed. The ideal thing is to make the following condition. If I'm obligated for this prayer, then it is to fulfill my obligation. If not, it's a voluntary prayer. So the Mishnah Berurah says that if it hasn't passed the second time of davening, even though you're not davening that davening, or you davened it already, you could still make up. Why? Because he disagrees with the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's not that it has to be, but he's saying that in case maybe the halacha is not like him, so therefore you make a condition to say that if I'm able to daven now, then I'm making up for what I missed. Let's say the morning prayer. And if I'm not able to daven now, I'm not able to make up, then this is just a voluntary prayer, meaning it's something that's called a tefillas nedava. I mean, it's like a person could pray to God in theory whenever they want. It's not because you're not fulfilling your obligations, so to say. Okay. Law number 6. Vav. Tfilas ha-tashlumim shu mispal. Okay, this is an important law. Tfilas ha-tashlumim shu mispal chayiv lihispal kamay shu mispal oz tfilas chayva. Right? So what happens? You forgot to daven a prayer, or you couldn't daven an oinus. Doesn't make a difference how. Now you have to make up that davening. But the question is, what are you davening at that time? He gives an example. Let's say this could happen, right? Shabbos is coming in, and everything's hectic, and you forgot to daven mincha Friday afternoon, and by the time you remember it's already too late, it's Ma'ariv time, right? You come into shul, it's too late to daven mincha. Mispal avrish time Shabbos. So then you have to do 2 tefillas. But what tefillas do you do? The one that you missed was a mincha of the week. Now you're davening Arvis of Shabbos. It's another Shmoneh Esrei. It's another tefillah. So the halacha is you do two prayers of Friday night davening of Ma'ariv, two Ma'arivs of Shabbos. Even though the second one, you have to remember the rule of thumb is the first one is the obligatory. The second one is the one you're making up. So even though the second one is making up for a prayer of the week, and a prayer of the week is not the prayer of Shabbos, but now it's Shabbos. Mispal shel Shabbos, you pray the second prayer of Shabbos. Mispal shel Chol, and here he says the halach like this: if by mistake you didn't know the law, and you daven the first prayer Friday night of Shabbos, and now you remember that you didn't daven minchas, you want to do a second one, you daven the regular Shemona Esrei, which is the tefillah of the week. Chayzer mispal, you have to do a second tefillah. You have to make another one. That means a third time. The one for the Arvis of Shabbos has to be the one that makes up for mincha. B'chein be'erev Chodesh. Same thing would apply. Let's say today, God forbid, it's Sunday afternoon. You forget to daven mincha. If that happens, im lo yispal mincha, mispal avishtam, so you do two marivs, which would be Sunday night. And then both of them you say the Yalav Yaveh. Even though you're making up for a mincha davening that was before Rosh Chodesh, so why would I say Yalav Yaveh? Because now it's Rosh Chodesh. Now you say Yalav Yaveh. Ve'im loy hispalel avish b'Rosh Chodesh. Let's say tomorrow night the person misses davening. So you didn't daven, you missed the evening prayer of Rosh Chodesh, which you're supposed to say Yalav Yaveh. Shemispal Shachar time. Now you have to pray 2 times in the morning. But what's the difference? The difference is Im Shachach Yalav Yaveh afilu b'shniya chayzer mispal. Let's say you forget Ma'ariv, or you can't. There's an oinus, whatever the reason is. And it's Rosh Chodesh. Now you have to do 2 times Shachris. Okay, it's also Rosh Chodesh, but there's a difference in the law. If you forget Yalav Yaveh Ma'ariv, you don't do it again, because Ma'ariv is a reshus, is kind of voluntary, even though we treat it as a chayva, as obligatory. But when it comes to doing it again, if you forget the Yalav Yaveh at night, you don't do it again because of Yalav Yaveh. But now that you forgot the second time, but it's Shachris, and Shachris you do have to repeat it. So do I have to repeat it? Let's say I daven the first tefillah Shachris, and I did the Yalav Yaveh. Then I did it again for Ma'ariv, and I forgot the Yalav Yaveh. So if I'm making up for Ma'ariv, then it's fine. No, you have to daven a third time because you forgot Yalav Yaveh in Shachris, even though it's a tefillah that's making up for Ma'ariv. So he says, "V'im lo yispal avos b'Rosh Chodesh, shemispal Shachris time, v'im shachach Yalav Yaveh, afilu b'shniya chayzer mispal." You have to repeat this again, even if in the second one, which is making up for Shachris, if you forget the Yalav Yaveh because it's the morning now and it's an obligatory prayer, then you have to pray 2 times. V'af agav the Tashlumin halayla, even though it's making up for the night. And if a night you wouldn't have repeated it if you forgot the Yalav Yaveh, but now it's the morning. What about Shabbos? Again, you've slept in, you took a afternoon nap, and by mistake, you asked someone to wake you up. It's not your fault, you didn't get woken up. So now you have to do 2 times Ma'ariv, but it's weekday already. You're davening Motzaei Shabbos, you do weekday. Here there's a difference. Do I make Havdalah twice? Right? We do Havdalah in the davening. So in Atachar Nantana we have the tefillah of Havdalah in the Shemona Esrei. The first one you say Havdalah. You don't say Havdalah in the second time. So we don't add like we add the Yalav Yaveh. We don't say twice Havdalah. Vatam said the reason is because the Atachar Nantanu is the Havdalah. We don't do it twice. We don't do Havdalah twice. And so too on the opposite. If you forget Ma'ariv Motzaei Shabbos, right? You fell asleep. It was late. Shabbos came out late, and you fell asleep, and you forgot to daven Ma'ariv. Mispal Shachar time, you have to do Shachar 2 times. Then you do say in the second, you do add Atachar Nantanu in the second prayer because you haven't yet made Havdalah in the davening. Because the person has to do Havdalah in the prayer. Okay, let's see the footnotes. There's a lot of footnotes here. Let's try to get through them before the end of the class. Footnote number 10. Yalav Yaveh, you say Yalav Yaveh. You say Yalev Yavoy despite the fact that this Shemona Esrei is compensation for Shemona Esrei that did not require Yalev Yavoy. Okay, so Ma'ariv, you're going to do 2 Yalev Yavoys if you've got Mincha Erev Rosh Chodesh, even though Ma'ariv it's a Tashlumin. You're making up for a prayer that doesn't have an obligation on its own for Yalev Yavoy. For the times when omitting Yalev Yavoy would not require repetition, which would be, for instance, Ma'ariv. So even though Ma'ariv you wouldn't have to repeat it, but because you're doing the 2 times in Shabbos, you have to repeat it. To make up the makeup tefillah has to be also done with the Yalev Yavoy, so you have to make up a 3rd time. Means again, if you daven Ma'ariv, if you forgot Ma'ariv and Rosh Chodesh, you daven 2 Shacharis, and you forget the Yalev Yavoy in the 2nd tefillah, you say, well, I'm making up for Ma'ariv, which I don't have an obligation. No, the law is you have to daven 3 times. Sorry, another time to make up for the Yalev Yavoy you missed in the Tashlumin, in the addition that you're making up for the compensation prayer. Even though it's a compensation for a prayer that itself, you wouldn't have to repeat it. Okay, just to put it simple, besides Havdalah, we always look at what you're praying now, not what you missed. If you missed Mincha of the week, now we're davening Ma'ariv Shabbos, you do 2 Shabbos. You missed Ma'ariv Mincha of the week, and now it's Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh, you do Yalev Yavoy twice. You missed Ma'ariv Yalev Yavoy. Missed Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh. Now you daven Shachris twice. And in the Shachris 2nd tefillah, which is making up for Ma'ariv, you forgot Yalev Yavoy, and had it been a story in Ma'ariv, you wouldn't have to repeat it, because Ma'ariv is a Rishus, but now you're doing Shachris, you have to repeat it. The only time that the rules change is with Havdalah, that in Havdalah, if you forgot Mincha, Shabbos, you only do Havdalah in the 1st prayer, and if you forgot Ma'ariv, you only do Havdalah in the 2nd prayer. Okay. 14. You're not required to repeat the tefillah, nevertheless now is the day, and omitting Yalev Yavoy during the daytime, Shemoneh Esrei requires repetition of the tefillah. No, like we said, an additional prayer is said in Ma'ariv at the conclusion of the Shabbos, which is connected to the Havdalah. Okay. 16. Despite the fact that the 2nd Shemoneh Esrei is Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei, despite the fact that the 2nd Shemoneh Esrei is a Ma'ariv Shemoneh Esrei when Atach Tanu is required. Yes, we don't say it again because we only say Havdalah once. The reason is that Atach Tanu is Havdalah. Havdalah is a blessing reciting upon the conclusion of Shabbos, denoting the separation of the holy Shabbos and the profane weekdays, and therefore we don't have to do that twice. 18. One more footnote before we close the class. Unlike the special prayer added to Shemoneh Esrei on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Yom Tov, where each tefillah requires that special prayer, Havdalah signifies a distinction between Shabbos and the weekdays. Yom Tov and the weekdays need only be said once, according to the Magen Avraham. And when do we say it? Either we say it in the 1st tefillah if it's Ma'ariv, or the 2nd tefillah if it's Shachris, because that's the one that's making up for Ma'ariv. Okay, we're going to stop here. And we have a few more laws in this chapter that we'll finish next week. Are there any questions before we complete the class? All right. So Laila Tov, everyone, and Julie and Ariel, you work out your differences. Laila Tov.